The winter sun cut sharp angles through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Avalon Midtown Tower lobby, casting geometric shadows across Italian marble floors that still held the chill of early morning. December in Atlanta rarely brought snow, but it delivered a crisp bite to the air that made breath visible and kept the city's residents bundled in wool coats and scarves as they rushed through their morning routines. The lobby hummed with controlled chaos at 7:45, a symphony of clicking heels, rolling luggage wheels, and the persistent chime of elevator arrivals, announcing residents descending from 32 floors of luxury living. Lieutenant Sarah Collins stood near the concierge desk, her athletic frame relaxed but alert, green eyes tracking the flow of humanity with practiced assessment. Beside her, K-9 Max sat with the disciplined stillness that had made him legendary within Atlanta PD's K-9 unit. The Belgian Malinois watched the lobby traffic with intelligent brown eyes, ears rotating like satellite dishes, catching frequencies humans couldn't perceive. His black tactical harness bore the department insignia, and despite his relaxed posture, every muscle beneath his fawn coat remained coiled with potential energy. The building manager, a fastidious man named Howard Prescott, hovered nearby with the nervous energy of someone whose orderly world had been disrupted. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his charcoal suit impeccable, but sweat beaded at his temples despite the lobby's aggressive air conditioning. "I appreciate you coming so quickly, Lieutenant," Prescott said, his voice pitched low to avoid alarming the stream of residents passing through. "The anonymous complaint started 3 weeks ago. Notes slipped under my office door, claims of suspicious activity near the package lockers, unusual visitors accessing the system at odd hours." Sarah nodded, her attention briefly catching on the wall of automated package lockers that dominated the lobby's east side. 48 brushed steel compartments arranged in a gleaming grid, each with its own digital display and keypad. The system represented modern convenience distilled to its essence, allowing delivery drivers to deposit packages securely and residents to retrieve them at their leisure using unique codes sent to their phones. "And building security hasn't identified anything concrete?" Sarah asked. Prescott's jaw tightened. "Our cameras show nothing unusual. Residents access their lockers, delivery personnel make their drops, everything appears normal. But the notes keep coming. Whoever is sending them seems genuinely frightened, but they won't come forward directly." Sarah understood the reluctance. In a building like this, where units started at 800,000 and penthouses commanded several million, residents guarded their privacy fiercely. Coming forward about suspicious activity meant potential involvement, questioning, perhaps even publicity. For people who paid premium prices for anonymity, that was unacceptable. "We'll do a standard sweep," Sarah said. "Max will check the common areas, the parking levels, the package system. If there's something here, he'll find it." She didn't add that anonymous tips were often the product of paranoid minds or neighbor disputes, that this sweep would likely reveal nothing more than the ordinary anxieties of people living too close together in vertical boxes. But the department had learned to take such requests seriously, especially in high-profile buildings where any incident would generate media attention and political pressure. Prescott exhaled with visible relief. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I've informed building security to give you full access, whatever you need." Sarah gave a brief nod and turned her attention to Max. The dog rose immediately, understanding without verbal command that work was beginning. Together, they moved toward the elevator bank, passing a young woman struggling with a yoga mat and coffee, an elderly man shuffling toward the mailboxes, a maintenance worker pushing a cart loaded with cleaning supplies. The elevator whisked them silently to the underground parking levels, where Max began his methodical work. Sarah watched him move through the concrete cavern with the fluid grace that had always characterized his searches. He worked the space in a grid pattern, nose sampling the air in quick bursts, processing scent information with a sophistication that no technology could match. Cars gleamed under fluorescent lights, BMWs and Mercedes and Teslas lined up like expensive toys in a display case. Max cleared the parking levels in 40 minutes, finding nothing of concern. They moved through the basement storage units, the mechanical rooms housing the building's heart of pumps and generators, the loading dock where delivery trucks backed in to disgorge their cargo of packages and furniture. Everything registered as normal. Max worked with his characteristic focus, but his body language remained relaxed, his alerts absent. They ascended to the ground floor and began working the common areas. The fitness center with its rows of treadmills and weight machines, the business center with its private offices and conference rooms, the rooftop terrace with its infinity pool and cabanas. Max searched while residents cast curious glances their way, some pulling out phones to snap photos of the handsome police dog at work. By mid-morning, Sarah was beginning to conclude that the anonymous tipster was indeed simply paranoid. They had covered most of the building's common areas without incident, and all that remained was the lobby and the package locker system. They returned to the ground floor to find the lobby less crowded now. The morning rush having dissipated, a few residents lingered near the coffee station, and a delivery driver was depositing packages into the automated system, guided by an app on his phone that assigned each parcel to a specific locker. Sarah guided Max toward the wall of lockers, intending this to be their final sweep before compiling a report that would reassure Prescott and likely never be read by anyone else. Max approached the system with the same professional attention he'd given every other area, nose working the air in front of the metal compartments, and then everything changed. Max's body went rigid. The transformation was instantaneous and unmistakable, a switch flipping from routine search to high alert. His nose pointed directly at a locker in the third row from the bottom, fifth from the left. His ears locked forward. His breathing became shallow and controlled. He didn't bark, didn't whine, didn't paw at the compartment. He simply froze, every fiber of his being communicating a single message: here. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. She'd worked with Max for years, had seen this passive alert hundreds of times. He wasn't wrong. He was never wrong. Whatever was inside that locker had triggered his training, and that training covered a specific category of threats. She stepped closer, examining the locker's display panel. It showed a package was present, awaiting retrieval. The label visible through the small window of the compartment door caught her attention immediately. White paper, standard shipping label format, but the addressing was wrong. No recipient name, no apartment number, no return address. Just 2 words written in cheerful red marker: to Santa. Sarah's blood ran cold. She'd seen enough suspicious packages in her career to know that innocuous appearances meant nothing. The most dangerous items often came wrapped in ordinary packaging, designed specifically to avoid attention until it was too late. And Max's training was comprehensive, covering the full spectrum of threats that could be concealed in parcels and containers. She took a step back, creating distance while maintaining visual contact with the locker. Her mind raced through protocols, assessing the situation with the rapid calculation that separated experienced officers from novices. The lobby was still partially occupied. The concierge was at his desk. A maintenance worker was adjusting a light fixture near the elevators. 2 residents waited for their morning coffee at the automated station near the windows. All of them were potential casualties if the locker contained what Max's alert suggested it might. She keyed her radio, keeping her voice level despite the adrenaline now flooding her system. Dispatch, this is Lieutenant Collins at Avalon Midtown, 1100 block of Peachtree. I have a K-9 alert on the package locker system, requesting immediate backup and bomb squad notification. We need to initiate building lockdown protocols. The response came quick and professional, dispatch confirming units en route and alerting the explosive ordnance disposal team. Sarah turned to find Prescott standing nearby, his face drained of color. "Mr. Prescott, I need you to activate your building's emergency protocols immediately. No one in or out. All residents need to shelter in their units. Clear this lobby now." To his credit, Prescott didn't argue or ask questions. He moved to the concierge desk and began issuing commands, his training for such scenarios apparently more robust than his nervous demeanor had suggested. Within minutes, security personnel were ushering bewildered residents toward the elevators, the lobby emptying with surprising efficiency. Sarah positioned herself between the package lockers and the remaining occupants, Max holding his alert position with unwavering focus. The delivery driver who'd been loading packages stood frozen near the exit, eyes wide. "Sir," Sarah called to him, "I need you to step outside slowly and wait for officers to take your statement. Don't leave the area." The driver nodded frantically and backed toward the glass doors, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste to comply. The next 20 minutes stretched into eternity. Patrol units arrived first, establishing a perimeter around the building and cordoning off the street. Curious pedestrians gathered at the barriers, phones raised to capture whatever drama was unfolding. News vans began appearing within minutes, their crews setting up equipment with practiced efficiency. Inside, the lobby had transformed from a bustling transit point to an eerie vacuum. The package lockers stood in accusatory silence, their digital displays glowing with mundane readouts that belied the potential danger within. Max maintained his position, his focus unwavering, the embodiment of training meeting purpose. Sarah briefed arriving officers on the situation, coordinating the evacuation of nearby businesses and ensuring that emergency medical services were staged at a safe distance. The protocols existed for exactly this scenario, but executing them in real time always revealed gaps and complications that planning couldn't anticipate. The bomb squad followed, their heavy vehicle parking in the loading zone while technicians in blast suits prepared their equipment. Sarah briefed the team leader, Sergeant Marcus Webb, on Max's alert and the anomalous package labeling. Webb studied the locker through binoculars, his weathered face revealing nothing. "That's a strange one," he admitted. "No recipient, no return address. Just a Santa. Could be a prank, could be someone's idea of holiday spirit." "Max doesn't alert on holiday spirit," Sarah replied. Webb nodded slowly. "No, he doesn't." He looked at her with the respect that came from years of trusting K-9 units. "Your dog's got the best nose in the city. If he says there's something wrong with that package, there's something wrong with that package." The bomb squad deployed their robot, a tracked unit equipped with cameras and manipulation arms. Sarah watched on a monitor as it approached the package lockers, its mechanical arm extending toward the compartment Max had identified. The tension in the mobile command post was suffocating, every breath held, every eye fixed on the screen. The robot's camera provided a close-up view of the package inside the locker. Standard cardboard box, perhaps 10 inches square. The To Santa label was clearly visible now, the cheerful red letters, somehow sinister in this context. The robot's sensors began their sweep, detecting density. Chemical signatures, electromagnetic emissions. Webb studied the readings, his frown deepening. "I'm not seeing explosive compounds," he said slowly. "But there's something organic in there, and the density is wrong for normal contents. The composition suggests something compressed, packaged for volume efficiency, rather than legitimate shipping purposes." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Organic material that would trigger Max's training but wasn't explosive. The categories were limited and none of them were good. Narcotics were the most likely culprit, specifically the synthetic opioids that had flooded American streets in recent years. Max's training had been updated to include detection of fentanyl and its analogues, compounds so potent that even minimal exposure could be fatal. The implications cascaded through her thoughts. If this package contained what she suspected, it represented not just a single crime, but potentially a larger operation. No one shipped significant quantities of synthetic opioids through legitimate channels unless they had confidence in a distribution system. And that confidence suggested infrastructure, planning, perhaps an ongoing enterprise. "Can you open it remotely?" she asked. Webb shook his head. "Lockers designed to prevent tampering. We'd have to either get the access code or cut it open. Given the circumstances, I'm recommending we evacuate the upper floors as a precaution and bring in the hazmat team for consultation." The next hour became a coordinated ballet of emergency response. Residents were guided down fire stairs and out through secondary exits, loaded into buses that would take them to a nearby community center. The building's sophisticated systems were overridden by emergency protocols, transforming the luxury tower into an empty shell. Through it all, Sarah remained in the mobile command post. Her attention split between the ongoing operation and the mystery of the package. Max had been moved to a safe distance, but remained alert, still focused on the building, as if the threat personally offended him. The Belgian Malinois had an emotional investment in his work that went beyond simple training. He understood, in whatever way dogs could understand such things, that his abilities served a purpose beyond treats and praise. The residents' evacuation proceeded smoothly, years of fire drills having prepared them for emergency egress, even if the specific scenario was unprecedented. Sarah watched the stream of people departing, noting their expressions of confusion, concern, and in some cases irritation at having their routines disrupted. Few of them understood the potential severity of the situation, and she preferred to keep it that way until the facts were established. Building management had established a communication channel with evacuated residents, providing updates that were necessarily vague but reassuring. The situation was under control. Authorities were conducting a precautionary investigation. Normal building operations would resume as soon as it was safe to do so. The access code for the locker arrived from the package system's corporate headquarters after significant legal pressure. Every locker in the system maintained digital records, and the one containing the mysterious package had been assigned 3 days ago via an account that led nowhere. Fake name, prepaid credit card, AP address routed through multiple proxies. Whoever had used the system knew how to cover their tracks. Webb's team input the code remotely via the robot, and the locker door clicked open. The camera feed showed the box more clearly now, sitting innocuously on the metal shelf. The robot's arm carefully extracted it, placing it in a containment vessel for transport to the analysis unit. Sarah watched the armored vehicle carry the package away, knowing that answers would take time, but something nagged at her, a detail hovering at the edge of her consciousness. She pulled up the locker system records on her tablet, studying the data the company had provided. The package had been deposited 3 days ago by a delivery driver whose credentials checked out. But the driver's log showed he'd received the package for delivery through a third-party shipping aggregator, a service that accepted packages from anyone and routed them through the standard carrier network. The chain of custody was deliberately fragmented, designed to make tracking impossible. She scrolled through the system's activity log for the past month, looking for patterns. And there, buried in the data, she found something. 14 packages over 4 weeks, all deposited by legitimate carriers, all addressed to variations of the same non-recipient, to Santa, to St. Nick, for S. Claus, Dear Father Christmas. Each one had been retrieved within 48 hours of delivery. The access codes used by individuals who entered the lobby, punched in numbers, collected boxes, and left. Security footage showed them wearing hats, scarves, masks that obscured their faces. Different people each time, or perhaps the same person in different disguises. None of those packages had triggered any alerts. None had contained anything that would interest a police dog. But this one had. This one was different. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Webb. Preliminary analysis showed the package contained a significant quantity of fentanyl pressed into pills, designed to look like legitimate prescription medication. Street value in the hundreds of thousands. The Tusanta label was apparently a code, a signal to whoever was meant to retrieve it that this particular package contained product rather than the payment or communications that the other labeled packages likely carried. She stared at the message, pieces clicking into place. The scale of what they'd uncovered was staggering. A single package containing enough synthetic opioids to kill thousands of people, disguised as a holiday delivery and routed through a luxury apartment building's convenience system. The audacity of it, the casual evil of treating mass death as a logistical problem to be optimized, made her jaw tighten with suppressed anger. Fentanyl had become the scourge of American communities, responsible for overdose deaths that climbed year after year, despite every effort to stem the tide. The pills in that package would have dispersed through Atlanta's streets, each one a potential funeral waiting to happen. Some would reach people struggling with addiction who knew the risks. Others would find their way to first-time users seeking a recreational high. Unaware that the margin between euphoria and death had narrowed to almost nothing, someone had built a distribution network using the building's package locker system as a dead drop. The lockers were perfect for the purpose, accessible 24 hours a day, monitored but anonymous, designed specifically to allow strangers to deposit and retrieve packages without human interaction. The system had been running for weeks at minimum, possibly months. Drugs in, money out, communications passed between parties who never met face to face. And it might have continued indefinitely, if not for two factors. An anonymous tipster who'd noticed something wrong, and a Belgian Malinois with an extraordinary nose who'd found the one package that broke the pattern. Sarah returned to the building as forensic teams began their work. The lockdown remained in effect, and the tower felt like a tomb, all that marble and glass silent without the human activity that normally filled it. She found Prescott in the management office, looking like a man whose world had crumbled. "This is a nightmare," he said, his voice hollow. "A drug operation running through my building. The liability, the publicity, the lawsuits from residents. I need your help," Sarah said, ignoring his spiral of self-pity. "Someone inside this building is coordinating the operation. The packages don't select their own lockers. Someone with access to the system is assigning them, making sure the right boxes go to the right compartments, ensuring retrievals happen without interference." Prescott's head snapped up. "You think it's a resident or an employee? Someone who can access the locker management system, who knows the building's rhythms, who can ensure smooth operations. I need employee records, access logs, anyone who's had unusual patterns over the past few months." The building manager hesitated, the conflict between cooperation and liability playing across his face. Finally, self-preservation won out. He led Sarah to his computer and began pulling files. The Avalon Midtown employed 47 people across various roles, from security to maintenance to concierge services. Sarah worked through the records systematically, looking for red flags. Most employees had been with the building for years, their records clean and unremarkable. But three names drew her attention. Marcus Delgado, head of night security. He'd been hired 8 months ago, his previous employment history showing gaps that his references had apparently explained away. His shifts gave him unsupervised access to the building during the hours when most package retrievals occurred. Jennifer Walsh, assistant to the property manager. She had direct access to the package locker management software, could see every delivery and retrieval, could manipulate assignments if she knew how. Her personal finances showed recent improvements that didn't match her salary level. Raymond Costa, lead maintenance technician. He knew every inch of the building, every service corridor and access point. His keycard logs showed frequent visits to areas outside his normal responsibilities. Sarah studied each file, building profiles in her mind. One of these three, or perhaps all of them working together, had built a criminal enterprise within these walls. But proof was another matter. The packages were designed to be untraceable, the operation structured to prevent any single person from knowing enough to compromise the whole. She needed Max. The Belgian Malinois was waiting in the mobile command post, eager to return to work. His confinement during the bomb squad operations had been necessary, but clearly frustrating for a dog bred and trained for active engagement. He practically vibrated with anticipation when Sarah approached, his intelligent eyes asking questions his body language emphasized. Sarah briefed the forensic team leader on her theory and received clearance to conduct a secondary search, this time focusing on employee areas and the locations each of her three suspects frequented. The strategy was simple but proven. If any of them had been handling product or currency associated with the operation, Max would detect the residue that such contact inevitably left behind. They started with the security office, a cramped room off the lobby where monitors displayed feeds from cameras throughout the building. The space was cluttered with the detritus of long shifts, coffee cups and snack wrappers and personal items that accumulated when people spent significant portions of their lives in a single room. Marcus Delgado was waiting there, having been summoned from home when the lockdown began. He was younger than Sarah had expected. Mid-30s, with the physique of someone who spent serious time in the gym. His expression was carefully neutral, a cooperative but guarded. "Lieutenant," he said, nodding as she entered. "Crazy morning. Never had anything like this happen before." Sarah studied him while Max worked the room. "First drug bust in a building like this?" Delgado shrugged. "In my experience, yeah. Places like this, you get domestic disputes, drunk residents, occasionally some theft. But drugs. These people have too much to lose." Max moved methodically through the space, sniffing desk drawers, the small closet where personal items were stored, the cushions of a worn couch. His body language remained relaxed, professional, but not alerting. Whatever secrets Marcus Delgado might be keeping, they weren't hidden in this room. They moved on to the maintenance areas, where Raymond Costa met them with undisguised suspicion. He was older, late 50s, with the weathered hands and permanent squint of someone who'd spent decades doing physical work. His accent placed him somewhere in the Portuguese-speaking world, though time in America had softened it. "I don't know why you need to search here," he said, as Sarah and Max entered the main workshop. "I fix pipes, repair doors, nothing to do with packages." "Just being thorough," Sarah replied. Max was already working, nose moving across workbenches cluttered with tools and spare parts. The space smelled of machine oil and cleaning chemicals, a sensory challenge for any detection dog. Costa watched the search with arms crossed, his face revealing nothing. When Max moved toward a storage closet in the back, the maintenance chief's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Sarah noted the change, filing it away. Max nosed around the closet's contents, industrial cleaning supplies, replacement parts, seasonal decorations waiting to be stored. He paused at a cardboard box shoved into the back corner, his attention sharpening. But the alert that followed was incomplete, uncertain. He looked at Sarah with something like confusion in his intelligent eyes. "What's in that box?" Sarah asked, pointing. Costa's jaw tightened. "Old uniforms. We keep them for spare parts, patches and buttons when current uniforms need repair. Mind if I take a look?" The maintenance chief didn't move to stop her, but his tension was palpable. Sarah pulled the box out and opened it, finding exactly what Costa had described. Worn maintenance uniforms folded neatly, some missing buttons or showing repair patches. She examined them carefully, finding nothing unusual. But Max's behavior had been strange. He'd shown interest without committing to a full alert, suggesting he'd detected something residual, a trace of scent rather than an active source. Someone had handled something in this area, something that had left behind traces of the same compounds Max had detected in the package. Sarah thanked Costa for his cooperation, noting the relief that flickered across his face as she and Max departed. The maintenance chief was involved somehow, she was increasingly certain, but involved how? As a participant, a facilitator, or merely someone who'd inadvertently come into contact with the operation? Jennifer Walsh was last. The assistant property manager occupied a small office adjacent to Prescott's larger one, her desk organized with obsessive precision. She rose when Sarah entered, a thin woman with sharp features and nervous energy that seemed to be her default state. "I've already given my statement to the other officers," Walsh said. "I don't know anything about drug packages. I process paperwork, handle tenant complaints, manage vendor contracts. I don't even check the package system most days." "But you have access to it," Sarah said. Walsh's eyes narrowed. "Administrator access, yes. For troubleshooting when residents can't retrieve their packages, or when the system glitches. But I haven't used it for anything improper." Max worked the office while they talked, and Sarah watched Walsh track the dog's movements with poorly concealed anxiety. When Max approached her desk, Walsh actually stepped back, putting distance between herself and whatever he might find. The Malinois circled the desk, nose working carefully. He paused at a drawer on the left side, his body language shifting toward alert. Not the full, rigid posture he'd shown at the package locker, but definitely heightened interest. "What's in that drawer?" Sarah asked. Walsh's face went pale. "Personal items. Nothing relevant I'd like to see." For a long moment, Walsh didn't move. Then, with the air of someone accepting inevitable defeat, she opened the drawer. Inside, among the usual office supplies and personal effects, was a smartphone in a distinctive case. Not her primary phone, which Sarah could see in her jacket pocket. A second device. "That's for personal calls," Walsh said quickly. "The company phones record everything. I wanted some privacy." Sarah picked up the phone, noting that it was locked with a passcode. "Mind unlocking it?" "I don't see why that's necessary, because my dog is telling me there's something interesting about this drawer, and that phone is the only unusual item in it. You can unlock it voluntarily, or I can get a warrant. Your choice." Walsh's composure cracked. Her lower lip trembled and tears began sliding down her cheeks. "I didn't know what they were moving at first. I swear I didn't. They told me it was just grey market goods, luxury items avoiding import taxes. They paid me to assign certain packages to certain lockers, to make sure the retrieval codes went to specific numbers. That's all." Sarah felt the familiar surge of a case breaking open. "Who are they?" "I don't know names. Everything was handled through that phone. Messages that deleted themselves, instructions on what to do and when. They deposited money in a crypto wallet I set up. I never met anyone face to face." "How long has this been going on?" Walsh swallowed hard. 6 months, maybe 7. It was so easy at first. Just moving numbers around in a computer system. No one got hurt, no one noticed. But then the packages got more frequent and I started wondering what was really inside them. When I tried to back out, they threatened me. Said they knew where I lived, what car I drove. Said if I talked to anyone, they'd make sure I regretted it. Sarah read Walsh her rights and had a patrol officer take her into custody. The second phone would be crucial evidence, even if the messages self-destructed. Digital forensics could often recover data that users thought was gone forever. But Walsh was clearly just a cog in the machine. Someone else had recruited her, run her, threatened her when she got cold feet. Someone with a bigger stake in the operation and more to lose if it fell apart. Sarah returned to the evidence compiled so far, looking for connections. The anonymous tips that had prompted this morning's search. The 14 packages with Santa-related labels. The sophisticated use of technology to cover tracks. And now, a frightened employee who'd been coerced into facilitating the operation. She pulled up the security footage from the past month, focusing on the package locker area. The individuals who'd retrieved the labeled packages were indeed well disguised, their features hidden by winter accessories and strategic positioning. But watching them move through the lobby, Sarah noticed something. They all knew exactly where the cameras were, not the sort of casual awareness that came from frequent visits. These people moved with deliberate precision, turning their heads at specific moments, using other people as shields. They'd been trained, or at least thoroughly briefed, on the building's surveillance layout. Only someone with intimate knowledge of the security system could provide that level of detail. Someone like the head of night security. Sarah found Marcus Delgado in the lobby, ostensibly supervising the forensic team's work, but clearly monitoring everyone who came and went. She approached him with Max at her side, noting how the security chief's eyes flicked to the dog before settling on her face. "Mr. Delgado, I have some additional questions. Would you mind coming to the management office?" Delgado's smile was easy, unconcerned. "Of course, Lieutenant. Happy to help however I can." They walked together through the empty lobby, their footsteps echoing in the unnatural silence. Max padded between them, and Sarah noticed that the dog's attention kept returning to Delgado with unusual intensity. The Malinois was picking up something, traces of scent or behavioral cues that told him this person warranted watching. The management office had been cleared of forensic activity, and Sarah closed the door behind them. Delgado settled into a chair with the relaxed posture of someone who had nothing to hide, but his eyes were calculating, always moving. "You were hired 8 months ago," Sarah began, "right around the time this operation appears to have started." "Coincidence," Delgado said. "I came from a security firm in Miami. You can check my references." "I did. Your references are solid, almost too solid. Every single one of them describes you in glowing terms, uses similar language, mentions the same qualities. It reads like a script." Something flickered in Delgado's eyes, quickly suppressed. "I'm good at my job. People remember that. I'm sure you are. I'm also sure that someone with your skills would know exactly how to exploit a building's security vulnerabilities, where the camera blind spots are, when staff coverage is thinnest, how to coach people to move through the lobby without being identified." "That's quite an accusation, Lieutenant. It's an observation. An accusation would be me saying that you recruited Jennifer Walsh, taught her how to manipulate the package system, and used your position to ensure the operation ran smoothly. That you threatened her when she wanted out, and that you've been running a drug distribution network through this building for the better part of a year." Delgado's facade cracked for just a moment, something hard and dangerous surfacing before he regained control. "You don't have any evidence of that. Walsh is a desperate woman looking for someone to blame. Whatever she told you is the fantasy of a scared mind." Sarah leaned forward. "Here's the thing about K-9 units, Mr. Delgado. Max doesn't just find packages. He finds traces, residue, the scent compounds that cling to people who've handled certain substances. And right now, he's very interested in you." As if on cue, Max shifted his position, his focus clearly locked on the security chief. The dog's body language wasn't a full alert, but the interest was unmistakable. His nostrils flared slightly, processing information that human senses could never access. Whatever scent signature Delgado carried, it was telling Max something worth paying attention to. The silence stretched between them, tension building like pressure before a storm. Sarah watched Delgado's face. It amused him and served a practical purpose. Different labels meant different contents. To Santa was product. To Saint Nick was payment. Dear Father Christmas was communications. The system allowed his network to operate without direct contact, each party knowing only their specific role. What Delgado hadn't anticipated was an anonymous tipster whose identity remained unknown. Someone in the building who'd noticed the patterns and found the courage to report them. He also hadn't anticipated that a routine K-9 sweep would bring Lieutenant Sarah Collins and her legendary partner to the lobby on the exact morning when a significant drug shipment was sitting in the package lockers. Sarah spent the evening at the precinct, coordinating with detectives and federal agents who'd taken interest in Delgado's multi-city history. The FBI had been tracking similar operations in Miami and Houston without connecting the dots, and Delgado's arrest provided the missing link that unified their separate investigations. What had appeared to be independent criminal enterprises was revealed as a single network, managed by one man who'd perfected the art of exploitation. The full picture would take weeks to assemble, but the immediate threat had been neutralized. The drugs were off the street, seized before they could claim victims. The distribution network was broken, its components scattered and compromised, and its architect was facing charges that would keep him behind bars for decades. His retirement score transformed into his final downfall. She filed her preliminary report as darkness settled over Atlanta, the city's lights winking on across the skyline visible through her window. The report ran to 30 pages, documenting every decision, every observation, every piece of evidence collected during the operation. It would be reviewed by supervisors, referenced by prosecutors, potentially examined by defense attorneys looking for procedural errors. Every word had to be precise, every fact verifiable. Max dozed in the corner of her office, the day's exertions having finally caught up with him. His paws twitched occasionally, perhaps chasing phantom suspects through dream landscapes. Captain Rodriguez appeared in her doorway, his weathered face showing something that might have been approval. "Good work today, Collins. The commissioner's already calling this a major win. High-profile building, sophisticated operation, clean takedown. Max did the heavy lifting," Sarah replied. "I just followed where he pointed." Rodriguez's lips twitched toward a smile. "Yeah, well, the mayor's office doesn't give commendations to dogs. But between you and me, I'll make sure he gets the good treats." After he left, Sarah sat in the quiet of her office, processing the day's events. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind the familiar exhaustion that followed high-stress operations. But beneath the fatigue was satisfaction, the knowledge that her partnership with Max had once again made a difference. She thought about the anonymous tipster, whoever they were. Someone had watched the operation unfold, had suspected something was wrong, and had found the courage to speak up, even anonymously. That person would probably never know how their notes had led to this moment, how their suspicion had been validated, how their action had helped disrupt a network that was feeding poison into their community. That was the nature of police work, Sarah reflected. You rarely got to connect all the dots for everyone involved. You did your job, followed the evidence, trusted your training and your partner, and hoped that the pieces you uncovered fit into a larger picture of justice. Some cases ended with neat resolutions, perpetrators identified and punished, victims given closure. Others remained incomplete, questions unanswered, justice approximate at best. The Avalon Midtown case fell somewhere in between. They'd caught the man responsible for building the operation, secured evidence that would ensure his conviction, disrupted a network that had been poisoning communities across multiple states. But the demand that had made his enterprise profitable remained, and someone else was probably already working to fill the void he'd left behind. That knowledge could be paralyzing if you let it. The endless cycle of crime and enforcement, predators and protectors, the same battles fought in different locations with different faces. Sarah had learned early in her career that you couldn't think about the larger patterns too often. You focused on the case in front of you, the evidence you could gather, the arrest you could make. You measured success in individual victories rather than ultimate outcomes. Max seemed to understand this instinctively. He approached each search, each deployment, each opportunity to use his remarkable abilities with fresh enthusiasm. Whatever had happened before Whatever would happen after mattered less than the task at hand. Dogs lived in the present with a purity that humans could rarely achieve. Max stirred in his corner, raising his head to look at her with those intelligent brown eyes. He seemed to sense her contemplative mood, and he rose to pad across the office and rest his muzzle on her knee. The simple gesture of companionship cut through her exhaustion, reminding her why she did this work. "Ready to go home?" she asked him. His tail wagged once, and he moved toward the door with clear intent. The day was over. The case would continue through prosecutors and courts and legal proceedings, but their part was done, for now. They walked through the precinct together, collecting congratulations and questions from fellow officers who'd heard about the operation. Sarah answered briefly, deflecting credit to Max whenever possible. The dog bore the attention with dignified patience, accepting the occasional pat or treat from admirers. The night air hit them as they exited the building, Atlanta's December chill a sharp contrast to the heated interior. Sarah's car waited in the lot, and Max jumped into the back seat with practiced ease. As she pulled out into traffic, the city lights streamed past, and she felt the familiar sensation of decompression that marked the end of a successful operation. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for listening to the notes. The building feels safer tonight." Sarah stared at the message, realizing it must be from the anonymous tipster. She wanted to respond, to assure them that their courage had mattered, that they'd done the right thing. But the nature of anonymous tips meant accepting that some questions would never be answered. She typed a simple reply, "You made a difference today." Then she put the phone away and focused on the road ahead. Max settled into the back seat, his breathing evening out as the motion of the car lulled him towards sleep. Tomorrow would bring new cases, new challenges, new opportunities to protect and serve. But tonight they could rest with the knowledge that they'd done their job well. The Avalon Midtown's residents would return to their homes in the morning, their lives disrupted but ultimately safer. Jennifer Walsh would face charges but might earn leniency for her cooperation. Raymond Costa had been cleared of direct involvement but would likely spend some time reflecting on how easily he'd been manipulated. And Marcus Delgado would begin the long journey through a justice system that he'd spent years evading. Sarah thought about the package locker system, that gleaming wall of convenience that had been weaponized by criminal ingenuity. Technology created new opportunities for both service and exploitation, and law enforcement had to evolve constantly to keep pace. But some things never changed. The instinct of a well-trained dog, the intuition of an experienced officer, the courage of ordinary citizens who refused to look away from wrongdoing. Those elements remained the foundation of effective policing, regardless of how sophisticated the criminals became. She pulled into her driveway and killed the engine, sitting in the darkness for a moment before rousing Max. The Belgian Malinois stretched and yawned, then followed her to the front door with the eager anticipation of a dog who knew dinner and a warm bed awaited. Inside, the house was quiet and welcoming. Sarah fed Max and grabbed a quick meal for herself. Too tired to cook anything elaborate, they settled on the couch together, the television providing background noise while she reviewed case notes on her tablet. The forensic analysis of Delgado's electronics was already yielding information about his network. Names, dates, quantities, financial flows. The picture emerging was of a mid-level distributor who'd carved out a comfortable niche by avoiding the violence and visibility that brought down larger operations. He'd operated through technology and intimidation rather than muscle and territory, a modern adaptation of an ancient criminal enterprise. Sarah wondered how many buildings across the country hosted similar operations. Package lockers and delivery apps had transformed how people received goods, but they'd also created new vulnerabilities. The anonymity that made these systems convenient for legitimate users also made them attractive to those with something to hide. She made a mental note to propose a training update for the K-9 unit, incorporating lessons from today's operation. Other handlers should know how to identify the signs of package locker exploitation, how to read the patterns that might indicate criminal activity. Knowledge shared was vulnerability reduced. The training would need to cover both the technical aspects of package systems and the behavioral indicators that might suggest criminal use. How legitimate users interacted with lockers versus how criminal operatives moved through such spaces. The timing patterns that distinguished normal retrieval from coordinated pickups. The anomalies in delivery records that should trigger closer examination. Max would be part of that training too, demonstrating the detection capabilities that had made this case possible. His skills weren't unique to him alone. Other dogs in the unit had similar training, but his particular combination of sensitivity and reliability made him an ideal model for instructional purposes. Younger handlers could learn from watching how he worked, how his alerts manifested, how Sarah interpreted and responded to his signals. She pulled up the department's internal messaging system and sent a preliminary proposal to the training coordinator, flagging it for review when schedules permitted. These things moved slowly through bureaucratic channels, but planting the seed early meant faster eventual implementation. Max lifted his head suddenly, ears pricking toward the front window. Sarah tensed for a moment before recognizing the sound that had caught his attention, a car passing on the street, its headlights sweeping across the blinds. The dog relaxed when no threat materialized, settling back into his comfortable position against her leg. She ran her fingers through his fur, marveling as she often did at the partnership they'd built. Max wasn't just a tool or a weapon or a detection system. He was a colleague and companion, someone who shared her commitment to the work and shouldered its burdens alongside her. The bond between handler and K-9 was something that couldn't be fully explained to those who hadn't experienced it, a connection that transcended the verbal communication humans relied on. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Captain Rodriguez. Preliminary charges filed. DA's office is pushing for federal involvement, given multi-state connections. Good night, Collins. She typed a quick acknowledgement and set the phone aside. The case was in other hands now, moving through the system she'd fed it into. Her job was to find the evidence and make the arrest. Others would handle prosecution and punishment. Sleep tugged at her, and she considered the effort required to move from couch to bedroom. Max seemed to sense her deliberation and made the decision for her, jumping down and padding toward the hallway with clear expectation. "All right," she conceded, rising with a groan. "You're the boss." She followed him to the bedroom, where he claimed his usual spot at the foot of the bed. Sarah changed into comfortable clothes and slipped under the covers, the day's tension finally beginning to release from her muscles. In the darkness, her mind replayed the moment of Max's alert, that instant transformation from routine search to focused intensity. She'd known immediately that he'd found something significant, that the package locker held more than holiday gifts. Years of partnership had taught her to trust his instincts absolutely, to follow where his extraordinary senses led. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The city never stopped generating crime, never ceased producing situations that required response. But tomorrow could wait. Tonight, she and Max had earned their rest. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her, the sound of Max's steady breathing a comfort in the quiet room. Outside, Atlanta hummed with its usual energy, millions of lives intersecting in patterns of work and play, love and conflict, routine and crisis. Somewhere in that tapestry, criminals were planning new schemes and citizens were finding courage to report their suspicions, and officers were responding to calls that would test their training and resolve. The city's safety depended on that web of action and reaction, the constant push and pull between those who would exploit and those who would protect. Sarah and Max were just two threads in that larger pattern. But their thread mattered. The package locker that had held enough fentanyl to end hundreds of lives was now empty, its contents seized as evidence. The network that had operated in the shadows of luxury living had been dragged into light. And perhaps because of their work, someone who might have received those pills and made a fatal decision would instead wake up tomorrow to continue their life. That was enough. It had to be enough. You couldn't save everyone, couldn't prevent every crime, couldn't heal every wound the world inflicted on itself. But you could do your job, trust your partner, and find meaning in the moments when training and instinct and courage combined to make a difference. Sarah drifted into dreamless sleep, Max keeping watch at the foot of the bed. The night passed quietly, the city's sounds muffled by walls and windows, and when morning came, it would find them ready to begin again. The first rays of dawn crept through the bedroom curtains, and Max lifted his head with the alertness that never fully left him even in sleep. Sarah stirred, awareness returning in slow waves, the previous day's events settling back into her consciousness like sediment finding its level. She reached down to scratch Max's ears, receiving a tail wag in return. The dog showed no sign of the previous day's exertions, his energy apparently limitless despite the hours of searching and the tension of the arrest. It was one of the qualities that made Belgian Malinois exceptional working dogs. That combination of endurance and recovery that allowed them to operate at peak capacity day after day. Breakfast was a quick affair, kibble for Max and coffee with toast for Sarah. She checked her phone to find updates from the overnight team. Delgado had retained a lawyer and was refusing to cooperate, which was expected. Walsh had provided additional details in exchange for consideration on her charges, filling in gaps about how she'd been recruited and how the operation had expanded over time. The federal prosecutors were moving quickly, recognizing the opportunity to roll up a network that spanned multiple jurisdictions. Delgado's laptop was yielding contacts in Miami, Houston, Charlotte, and several other cities where he'd operated before arriving in Atlanta. Each name meant potential arrests, potential seizures, potential disruption of supply chains that fed addiction and death into communities across the Southeast. Sarah finished her coffee and prepared for another day. The paperwork from yesterday's operation would consume much of her morning. The bureaucratic aftermath that followed every significant arrest. She didn't mind it exactly. Documentation mattered. The cases that fell apart in court often did so because of sloppy paperwork, missed details, forms that didn't match, or statements that contradicted. She'd learned to approach the administrative side with the same attention she gave to field work. The precinct was already busy when she arrived, the morning shift settling into routines while the night shift wrapped up their final tasks. Sarah found a stack of messages waiting on her desk, interview requests from detectives working related cases, scheduling queries from the training unit about upcoming certifications, a memo from public affairs about potential media coverage of the Avalon Midtown case. She worked through the pile methodically, answering what she could and delegating what she couldn't. The administrative burden of modern policing was something academy training never adequately prepared officers for. Every operation generated paperwork, every arrest spawned reports, every investigation created chains of documentation that had to be maintained with meticulous attention. Some officers resented this aspect of the job, viewing it as bureaucratic interference with real police work. Sarah had learned to see it as essential, the evidentiary foundation that made prosecutions possible and protected officers from false accusations. Max settled in his corner, accepting the attention of officers who stopped by to congratulate them both. The department grapevine had spread word of the previous day's events, and everyone wanted details. How had Max detected the package? What had given Delgado away? Was it true that the operation had been running for months without anyone noticing? Sarah answered what she could, deflected what she couldn't, and tried to maintain focus on the immediate tasks at hand. The congratulations were appreciated, but also distracting, pulling her attention from work that needed completion before the press conference and subsequent chaos that would consume the rest of her day. Mid-morning brought a visitor she hadn't expected. Howard Prescott, the building manager from Avalon Midtown. He appeared at her office door, looking somewhat less polished than before, dark circles under his eyes, suggesting a sleepless night. "Lieutenant Collins," he said. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Sarah gestured to the chair across from her desk. "What can I do for you, Mr. Prescott?" He sat heavily, his usual fastidiousness replaced by obvious exhaustion. "I wanted to thank you, and to apologize. I should have been more vigilant. The signs were there if I'd been paying attention. Unusual activity around the package system, security coverage gaps that shouldn't have existed, an employee who suddenly seemed to have more money than her salary justified. You're not trained to spot those things," Sarah said. "That's why you called us." Prescott shook his head. "It's my building, my responsibility. I created an environment where this could happen, where people could exploit the systems I implemented for residents' convenience. The criminals bear responsibility for their choices, Mr. Prescott, not you." He didn't seem convinced, but he nodded anyway. "I wanted to ask, the anonymous tips, the notes under my door, do you know who sent them?" "No, and we may never know. But whoever they are, they showed considerable courage. It's not easy to report suspicious activity, especially when you don't know who to trust." Prescott absorbed this, his expression troubled. "I've been thinking about that. About how frightening it must have been to see something wrong and not know if reporting it would make any difference, or if it might put them in danger. I want to do something. Create a better system for residents to voice concerns, one that actually protects their anonymity and ensures follow-through." Sarah felt a small spark of hope at his words. One positive outcome of cases like this was that they sometimes inspired better practices, systems that made future crimes harder to commit or easier to detect. If Prescott followed through, the Avalon Midtown might become a model for other buildings to follow. "That sounds like a good idea," she said. "If you need guidance on best practices, I can connect you with our Community Outreach Division. They've been developing programs specifically aimed at helping property managers and building administrators create more effective reporting systems. The goal is to make it easier for people to share concerns without feeling exposed or vulnerable to retaliation." Prescott nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "I'd appreciate that. And Lieutenant, there's something else. I've been thinking about what happens after this. The media coverage, the questions from residents, the impact on the building's reputation. I don't want any of that to distract from what matters, which is that your team stopped something terrible from continuing." Sarah appreciated the sentiment, even if she suspected Prescott's motivations were mixed between genuine gratitude and concern for property values. The reality was that high-profile criminal cases often damaged the locations associated with them, creating stigmas that persisted long after the events themselves had faded from memory. The Avalon Midtown would forever be the building where the drug operation was discovered, and no amount of positive spin would entirely erase that association. But the alternative was worse. Had the operation continued, had the packages kept flowing through those gleaming lockers, the eventual exposure would have been far more damaging. Better to be known as the building where crime was stopped than the building where it flourished undetected. After Prescott left, Sarah returned to her paperwork, but her mind kept drifting to the anonymous tipster. Someone in that building had watched the operation unfold, had suspected something was wrong, and had found the courage to speak up. They'd accepted the risk that their notes might be ignored, that their concerns might be dismissed, that the people they were reporting might somehow discover their identity. That kind of courage deserved recognition, even if the person themselves remained unknown. Sarah made a mental note to work with Prescott on an appropriate acknowledgement, something that could be shared building-wide without compromising anyone's anonymity. The afternoon brought a call from the FBI field office. Agent Reeves, who was leading the federal investigation, had questions about the timeline of events and wanted to review the K-9 unit's procedures for evidence handling. Sarah walked him through everything, appreciating his thoroughness even as it consumed more of her day. By evening, she was ready to leave the precinct behind. Max had been patient through the long hours of desk work, but his restlessness was becoming apparent. He needed activity, the kind of physical and mental engagement that kept working dogs healthy and sharp. She took him to the training facility on the way home, letting him run through some exercises while she watched from the sideline. The Belgian Malinois attacked each challenge with enthusiasm, his earlier patience replaced by explosive energy. He cleared obstacles, found hidden training aids, responded to commands with crisp precision. Watching him work, Sarah felt the tension of the past 2 days finally begin to ease. This was what they did, she and Max. They trained, they worked, they solved problems and caught criminals and made their city a little safer. The specifics changed from case to case, but the fundamentals remained constant. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister, asking about holiday plans. Sarah realized with some surprise that Christmas was only 2 weeks away. The investigation had consumed her attention so completely that she'd lost track of normal time, the rhythm of approaching celebrations and family obligations. She typed a quick response, promising to call later to discuss details. Family gatherings were complicated, as they were for anyone in law enforcement. The job didn't stop for holidays, and criminals didn't take time off for celebrations. But she tried to maintain connections when she could, to preserve the parts of her life that existed outside the badge and the uniform. Max finished his training run and trotted over to her, tongue lolling in satisfied exhaustion. She rubbed his ears and led him to the car, both of them ready for the quiet comfort of home. The drive was peaceful, Atlanta's evening traffic cooperating for once. She stopped at a drive-thru for dinner, getting a burger for herself and a plain patty for Max. They ate in the car outside her house, the radio playing softly, the world feeling temporarily at peace. Inside, she settled on the couch with Max and turned on the news. The Avalon Midtown case had made the local broadcasts, though the coverage was necessarily incomplete. They showed footage of the building's exterior, interviews with residents who expressed shock and concern, statements from department spokespersons emphasizing that the threat had been neutralized and the investigation was ongoing. Sarah watched with professional detachment, noting what details had been released and what remained confidential. The media coverage was generally fair, crediting the K-9 unit's role without sensationalizing. She appreciated the restraint, knowing how easily such stories could be twisted into narratives that hindered rather than helped. Her phone rang with a call from Captain Rodriguez. "The DA's office is very happy," he said without preamble. "They're talking about this being a showcase prosecution, demonstrating interagency cooperation and effective use of resources." Sarah suppressed a sigh. Showcase meant publicity, which meant interviews and press conferences, and the kind of visibility that complicated rather than simplified her work. But she understood the politics, the need for successful cases to be promoted to secure funding and support. "They want you at a press conference tomorrow morning," Rodriguez continued. You and Max both. The commissioner wants to present commendations. Can't someone else handle the press conference part? Collins, you're the one who caught the bad guy. The public wants to see the officer responsible, and more importantly, they want to see that very photogenic dog of yours. It's good for morale, good for recruiting, good for community relations. Take the win. She knew he was right, even as she dreaded the prospect. All right. What time? 9 o'clock at City Hall. Dress uniform. Make sure Max is brushed and presentable. After hanging up, Sarah looked at the Belgian Malinois lounging beside her. He'd heard his name and was watching her with curious attention. You're going to be famous, she told him. Try not to let it go to your head. Max's tail wagged once, as if to assure her that celebrity wouldn't change him. In truth, K-9 units were perennial favorites with the media and public. There was something universally appealing about police dogs, their dedication and capability captured in footage that made for compelling television. Max had been featured in department promotional materials before, his photogenic appearance and impressive skills making him a natural ambassador for the unit. She spent the rest of the evening preparing, laying out her dress uniform and grooming Max until his coat gleamed. The mundane tasks helped settle her mind, providing focus that kept anxiety about the press conference at bay. Public speaking wasn't her favorite aspect of the job, and facing cameras always felt like an intrusion into work that she preferred to keep out of the spotlight. But she understood the necessity. The department needed positive visibility, especially in an era when law enforcement faced increasing scrutiny and criticism. Cases like this one, where good police work stopped dangerous criminals without incident, helped build the community trust that made effective policing possible. Every officer who stood at a podium and represented the profession well contributed to that larger mission. Sleep came more easily than she'd expected, the accumulated fatigue of 2 intense days finally demanding its due. She dreamed of package lockers, extending endlessly in all directions, each one containing mysteries that Max was working to solve. The dream had an anxious quality, a sense of searching for something important that remained just out of reach. She woke before her alarm, the pre-dawn darkness still heavy outside her windows. Max was already alert, sensing her wakefulness and responding in kind. They went through their morning routine in silence, the familiarity of it grounding her for the unusual day ahead. The press conference was everything she'd expected and dreaded. Bright lights, dozens of cameras, reporters shouting questions over each other. She stood beside Max on a platform at City Hall, flanked by the commissioner, the captain, and various officials whose names she'd already forgotten. The room buzzed with energy that felt almost aggressive, an appetite for information that would be satisfied one way or another. The commissioner gave a speech about the importance of community policing and the invaluable role of K-9 units in modern law enforcement. His words were polished and practiced, designed for sound bites and evening news segments. Captain Rodriguez presented the commendations with appropriate ceremony, reading citations that described the operation in heroic terms that made Sarah slightly uncomfortable. She accepted hers with brief thanks, aware of the cameras capturing every expression and gesture. Beside her, Max sat at perfect attention, his discipline holding even when cameras flashed in his face. He'd been through this before, training exercises that simulated the chaos of public events, and his composure was flawless. The commissioner crouched to present Max's commendation, a special citation for exceptional K-9 service, and the cameras captured the moment with the enthusiasm reserved for the most photogenic subjects. Max accepted the attention with patient dignity, allowing the commissioner to shake his paw for the photographers without any sign of the irritation that would have been entirely justified. When questions came, she answered as concisely as possible. Yes, the case had been challenging. Yes, Max's alert had been crucial. No, she couldn't comment on the ongoing investigation. Yes, she was proud of her unit and grateful for the support of her colleagues. The questions were predictable, the answers she gave equally so. A ritual dance between law enforcement and media that both sides understood implicitly. A few reporters tried to push beyond the prepared script. What about rumors of federal involvement? Had there been any threat to residents during the lockdown? Were similar operations being discovered in other buildings? Sarah deflected these with practiced non-answers, referring questioners to the FBI liaison or the DA's office for information beyond her authority to share. Finally, mercifully, it was over. The officials departed to their various obligations, and Sarah escaped to a quiet hallway with Max at her side. "You did great," she told him. Very professional, Max leaned against her leg, accepting the praise as his due. Whatever stress the press conference had caused him didn't show. His composure apparently as unshakable in front of cameras as it was in front of criminals. They returned to the precinct to find the investigation continuing without them. The federal team was making progress on Delgado's network, turning some of his associates into cooperating witnesses. Jennifer Walsh had provided detailed information about the package system exploitation, leading to protocols being developed to detect similar schemes in other buildings. Sarah spent the afternoon catching up on other cases that had been neglected during the operation. A residential burglary pattern that needed K-9 assistance. A missing person case where Max's tracking abilities might prove useful. The normal work that filled the gaps between headline-grabbing arrests. By the time she left for the day, she felt like some equilibrium had been restored. The Avalon Midtown case would continue to require attention as it moved through the system, but her primary involvement was complete. Other officers would handle witness coordination and evidence processing and trial preparation. She and Max could return to their regular duties, the daily work of patrol and response that formed the backbone of K-9 operations. The evening was quiet. She cooked a real dinner for the first time in days, something simple but satisfying, grilled chicken with roasted vegetables. The kind of meal that required enough attention to keep her mind engaged, but not so much that it became stressful. Max received his portion of approved treats and seemed content with the arrangement, settling nearby as she ate at the small kitchen table. The domestic routine felt grounding after the intensity of recent days. There was something centering about the simple acts of cooking and eating, about being in her own space, surrounded by familiar objects and comfortable silence. The job demanded so much intensity, so much constant alertness, that these moments of ordinary life became precious. They sat together on the couch, the television providing background noise, while Sarah read a novel she'd been working on for weeks. Reading had always been her escape, a way to step outside her own experiences and inhabit other minds and situations. The book was a mystery, naturally, though she found herself critiquing the detective work with professional skepticism that probably diminished her enjoyment. Max dozed beside her, his warmth a familiar comfort against her leg. His breathing was slow and regular, the deep relaxation of a dog who'd earned his rest. Even sleeping, though, some part of him remained aware, his ears occasionally twitching at sounds from outside that required assessment before dismissal. She thought about Marcus Delgado, sitting in a cell somewhere, contemplating the collapse of his carefully constructed operation. She thought about Jennifer Walsh, cooperating with prosecutors and hoping for leniency. She thought about the anonymous tipster, whoever they were, going about their life in the building they'd helped protect. And she thought about the package, labeled "To Santa," sitting innocently in a locker until Max's extraordinary nose detected what it really contained. The operation had relied on anonymity and technology, on systems designed for convenience being exploited for criminality. But it had been undone by something much older. The bond between a handler and her dog, the trust built through years of training and partnership. The instinct that told her Max's alert was never wrong. Technology would continue to evolve, creating new opportunities for both service and exploitation. Criminals would adapt, finding new vulnerabilities to exploit and new methods to avoid detection. But law enforcement would adapt too, developing new tools and techniques, training officers and dogs to recognize emerging threats. The fundamental dynamics wouldn't change. There would always be those who sought to profit from others' suffering, and there would always be those who stood against them. The balance shifted constantly, victories and defeats on both sides, but the struggle itself was permanent. It was woven into the fabric of human society, as old as civilization itself, and likely to continue as long as people lived together in communities. But that permanence wasn't cause for despair. It was simply the nature of the work. Doctors didn't stop practicing medicine because disease couldn't be permanently eradicated. Teachers didn't abandon education because ignorance would always exist. And police officers didn't surrender their duty because crime would never be fully eliminated. The value was in the doing, in the daily commitment to standing between innocent people and those who would harm them. Sarah finished her novel and prepared for bed, Max following his established routine of checking the house before settling at the foot of her bed. His patrol was brief but thorough, sniffing at doors and windows, confirming that the perimeter was secure. Only then did he allow himself to relax, curling into the familiar position he'd occupied countless nights before. The city hummed outside, millions of lives continuing their patterns, most of them unaware of the crimes prevented and criminals caught in their name. Atlanta slept for the most part, its rhythms undisturbed by the operations that had unfolded in the previous days. The news would fade, the story would become yesterday's headlines, and life would continue its relentless forward motion. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. Whatever came, she and Max would face it together. Their partnership, the foundation on which everything else was built. The years they'd spent working together had created something stronger than either of them could have achieved alone, a synchronization of instinct and training that made them more effective as a unit than the sum of their individual capabilities. She thought of the handlers and dogs who would come after them, the new partnerships being formed in training facilities across the country. Each one represented potential, the possibility of cases solved and crimes prevented and lives protected. The work would continue long after she and Max had retired, carried forward by officers and K-9s who would never know how their predecessors had shaped the path they walked. The steady rhythm of his breathing filled the quiet room, a sound she'd grown to find as comforting as any other. Max slept with the deep contentment of a dog who'd done his job well, whose purpose had been fulfilled, whose instincts had served their intended function. In his simple certainty, there was wisdom that humans often complicated away, the understanding that good work done well was its own reward. They were good at what they did, she and this remarkable dog. They made a difference in ways both visible and invisible, protecting people who would never know their names. The anonymous tipster in the Avalon Midtown would never meet them, would probably never learn the full extent of what their courage had uncovered. But because of their notes, and because of Max's extraordinary nose, and because of the partnership that Sarah had built with her four-legged colleague, something terrible had been stopped. It was enough. It had to be enough. And in the quiet darkness of a December night in Atlanta, with a case closed and a city a little safer, it felt like more than enough. The December wind stirred the trees outside, carrying the promise of colder nights to come. Somewhere in the city, other officers were responding to other calls, other dogs were working other searches, other stories were beginning that would need their own resolutions. The web of protection that law enforcement wove over Atlanta's streets never rested, never paused, never stopped its constant vigilance. Sarah's breathing slowed to match Max's rhythm, the two of them synchronized even in sleep. The house held them in its quiet embrace, a sanctuary from the demands of the work that would resume with morning light. Tomorrow there would be reports to file and witnesses to interview and new cases requiring attention. Tomorrow the grind would continue, the endless cycle of crime and response that defined their profession. But tonight there was peace. Tonight there was the simple satisfaction of a job completed and a threat neutralized. Tonight There was the warmth of a loyal partner at the foot of the bed and the comfortable silence of a home well earned. It felt like exactly what she was meant to do. And somewhere in a cell across the city, Marcus Delgado stared at a concrete ceiling and contemplated the ruins of his ambition, brought low by a dog who'd smelled through his careful deceptions. The Tosanta packages would never reach their intended destinations. The network he'd built would crumble without his guiding hand, and the justice he'd evaded for so many years had finally, inevitably, caught up with him. Atlanta slept on, unaware and unconcerned, trusting in the men and women and dogs who stood watch through the night. The city's heartbeat continued, strong and steady, as it had for generations, and would for generations more. In the morning, there would be new challenges, but that was tomorrow's concern. For now, in this quiet moment between cases, Sarah Collins and K-9 Max had earned their rest, and they took it, together as they did everything else.